I love bad video games. To understand your favorite pieces of media, sometimes you have to understand the worst. There's something freeing about playing a bad game, something that's been so panned critically, the bar is so low. The opportunity is there to change the narrative and really shock you. So that's what I'm going to be talking about today. I've selected 8 of the worst reviewed games on the PS2. I selected these games from their Metacritic listings and found some of the ones with the lowest Metascores on the platform. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to like it and subscribe to the channel. I also have a Patreon in the description if you want to get access to extra content or just support the channel. Hey Dad, it's me, your favorite son, and today I'd like to talk about bad games. Don't you love when one of your favorites comes back better than ever? I'm talking Resident Evil 2 Remake, Max Payne 2, even Silent Hill 2. Well, this July, guess who's back better than ever? Raycon's fan favorite Everyday Earbuds Classic model, now packing active noise cancellation. These bad boys have 8 hours of playtime and 32 hours of battery. They will never leave your ears. I'm always wearing mine. Their audio even rivals all of the big audio brands you know and love at half the price, and you just can't beat a deal like that. They also have 2 modes fit for your needs: noise isolation and awareness mode. In noise isolation mode, you're totally immersed, and Raycon's everyday earbuds block out all that outside noise that's distracting you from your work. But in awareness mode, you can hear what's going on around you while you're listening to your favorite band or podcasts. It's perfect for when I'm skating or out walking my dog and need to listen to all the things happening around me. And all you have to do to switch between these modes is to hold your finger on your right earbud and you're good to go. I use my Raycons every single day, whether I'm just listening to some YouTube videos while I'm making breakfast or if I'm taking my dog for a walk. Raycon's everyday earbuds are always in my ears. If you like good audio at a great price, active noise cancellation, and a long battery life, then these things are a steal. So go to buyraycon.com/yourfavoriteson to get 20% off fan favorite everyday earbuds classic. That's buyraycon.com/yourfavoriteson for 20% off these everyday earbuds classic. Sponsored by Raycon. Now back to the video. Fight Club is a fighting video game based on the film of the same name. It was developed by Genuine Games and was released on November 16th, 2004 in North America for the PlayStation 2. It has a 36 out of 100 on Metacritic. Fight Club is an adaptation of the Fight Club film directed by David Fincher and released in 1999, which was also an adaptation of the book written by Chuck Palahniuk. In this way, Fight Club is an adaptation of an adaptation, and you can really tell. The game follows the story of the film, except that we're playing another character that joins Fight Club and is seeing the events from the movie unfold from an outside perspective. We're just sort of a cog in the wheel for the most part. The first and most obvious criticism that I have for this game is that its cutscenes are terrible. Outside of the first and last cutscene in the game, most of the ones sandwiched in the middle are just slow zooms on still images of characters. This wasn't uncommon in the PlayStation 2 generation. Twisted Metal Black did this to great effect on the same hardware, but that game had a good atmosphere, good characters, the world was drawing you in. Fight Club is a cheap imitation of something else, the Temu, Shein, or store brand version. It's got a bunch of the same characters that weren't that consequential in the original movie, but they're here. But we've lost the framing. We aren't looking at this whole thing through the lens of our main character. This is no longer a story about consumerism and masculinity. It's about fighting, I guess. At the beginning of the game's story, we create a new character, one who we can name, but we can't adjust their look. The new guy, who I named Silas, is at Fight Club for the first time, looking for Tyler Durden. We witness a gruesome battle going on and even see an X-ray shot of some broken ribs. Our character is then thrust into his first ever fight, because if you remember the rules of Fight Club, if it's your first time here, you have to fight. We then have our first official Fight Club match against some poor sap named Ricky. The fighting system that Fight Club sports is very simplistic. We have 2 punch attacks, 2 kick attacks, etc. A lot less of our moves are sort of high-flying, jumping flip attacks, and because Fight Club is supposed to be somewhat realistic, a lot of our moves are simple strikes, jabs, and grapples. This means that combinations and attacks have to get a little more creative with the limited grounding that the game has. Our combos then often pull off larger strikes. We can do uppercuts with certain button combos, backhand fists with other characters. The characters in the game do sort of have their own distinct moveset, but it's nothing compared to what you'd find in any actual competent fighting game. It's mostly simple moves, punches, grabs, and kicks. The one thing I will say about the system that I really did like was the bone-breaking mechanic. I didn't even realize this was a thing until near the end of the game, where one of the fights requires that you break your opponent's arm to win. The game doesn't even tell you how to do this, by the way. Also, the move list is not accessible from the in-game menu. You can only look at it in the training mode. Awesome feature. When your opponent gets into the danger zone with his health, represented by a caution sign under their health bar, we can do a specific grab to break one of our opponent's bones. If they manage to survive this affair, then they actually will not be able to use that appendage. This happened to me a couple times, and I only had one arm to strike with. It's actually a pretty cool system, and it's one of the only well-done things in this awful game. After his first fight, our main character is questioned by Irving in the alleyway. That guy that runs the bar that Fight Club holds their meetings in.
I came to be a part of something.
You want to be a part of something? You get your papers straight. Tyler does his business there. Now buy me a goddamn beer.
There's just something about the performances in this game that are so corny. Like seeing people invoke these rules in real life is super dorky and it just doesn't feel right at all.
Rule 1, don't talk about Fight Club.
There's something cool about the tone and style that the OG movie has. This game takes that same tone and just makes it really lame. We defeat Irving in combat, and our hero is directed to the house on Paper Street so that he can meet Tyler Durden. We see Marla leaving the house, and Angel Face rejects his request to
Join the club.
join their club.
Fuck off. We're not taking applications from losers.
We meet Bob, who tells us that we have to fight to earn their respect. Oddly enough, Meatloaf was one of the only actors from the original movie that reprised his role in this game. The mechanic, Detective Stern, and the Halo bartender all reprised their roles as well, but no one else did. It's actually kind of sad because when you beat the game, there's a short interview from the actor that played Detective Stern in the movie, Tom Gossam Jr. He talks about how excited he is for the game because it's going to flesh out the detective's character even more. But the detective must have been cut from the main story because he just never really appears in the story mode. So ending your game with one of your returning actors talking about how cool it is their character gets more screen time only to get no screen time is kind of wild. It's also worth noting that Tyler Durden is voiced by Joshua Leonard in this game, who was one of the actors in the original Blair Witch Project. After taking down Bob, our main character is told that Tyler wants to meet once he gets back from Seattle with some sort of shipment. Our main character heads to the shipment and, of course, gets into a fight with Lou there. After defeating Lou, he tells us that Tyler is already heading towards San Francisco. Our hero then heads there and asks about Tyler, but of course is forced to fight the mechanic. After trouncing him, he tells us to head back to the house because Tyler wants to meet us. When we get back to the house, Angel Face is mad because we stole his spot in one of the previous fight clubs, or something, so we fight him too. He stares at one of his teeth in one of the worst looking shots in the game. The main character starts asking about Project Mayhem, but he's not supposed to ask about it. Jack shows up and asks him why he's here, and he tells him about how he got here, that he had nothing before Fight Club. We get a flashback showing that he tried to take his own life in a bar, but the bartender told him about Fight Club.
Thanks for the drink, pal.
Don't mention it. Look, bud, you can kill yourself if you want.
So he joined up. Jack talks about how Tyler has started clubs all over the country. If you haven't seen Fight Club before, spoilers ahead, I guess. Fight Club is about two characters, Tyler Durden and the narrator. At the end, it's revealed they're actually the same person, and Tyler was sort of a split part of the narrator's personality that was doing all the things that he was too scared to do. So at this point in the game is when the narrator has figured out that Tyler has disappeared, but the full reveal about Tyler hasn't happened yet. Our character heads to an airport and fights once again to try and get more info on Tyler. At this point, our character is finally a part of Project Mayhem, the project that Tyler Durden started out of Fight Club to revolutionize the world. We meet with the bartender from before, and our main character has to pass a test. A nearby guy broke a deal with Tyler, so we have to break his arm. This mission has to be completed by breaking his arm, otherwise we just lose. Our character is then sent to clean up one of the fight clubs and gets into a scuffle with the current lead. We beat him up and everybody agrees to follow the rules. We love rules. Our main character is then back at the Paper Street house, and Angel Face once again is pissed off enough to fight us. The main character gives an inspiring speech about the project, about their motivations. It doesn't come off inspiring at all. Our main character finds the narrator, who's now kind of going crazy, talking to himself as Tyler back and forth. It's easily the worst scene in the game. We have to beat up Jack, and when we do, he gives a speech before running off to the tower. We then get the end of the game. Our main character has become Tyler/Jack's right-hand man. He gives us the failsafe for the detonation. We then hear Jack upstairs shooting his own cheek to try and get rid of Tyler. We then get the scene between Marla and Jack, except it's fucking terrible. It's mostly the same ending as the original movie, except our main character is the one that actually pulls the trigger for the detonation. Ooh. The whole story is pretty unnecessary and dumb. I'm not even sure how you would do this game better, though. I honestly think it would have made sense to have our main character be one of the guys from a fight club in a different city, totally separate from Tyler Durden and Project Mayhem. Maybe towards the end he sees people getting caught up in Project Mayhem, but he eventually decides to try and stop them, at least in the city that he's in. Something a bit more grounded rather than trying to tie our character into the overall plot, making him the second to the top guy in the organization. It also just looks terrible. It's very short. Most of it is either boring or rushed. It's nonsense. The game does also have an arcade mode that lets you basically do the same thing you did in story mode, but without the cutscenes. If you manage to beat the story mode of the game, though, you get easily the best feature of this game, which is that you unlock Fred Durst as a playable character. I have no idea why he was just thrown into the game like this, but hey, I'm not complaining. There's also a survival mode where you can fight off opponents one by one, recharging your health bar slightly between each match. If you manage to get the high score on this mode, you unlock the narrator's boss as a playable character. But honestly, you wouldn't be able to tell it was him, so who cares? This whole game is just abysmal, and I can see why it has a 36% on Metacritic. The story is terrible, the features are not good, there's barely anything here. I will say that the fighting system at least has some interesting mechanics to play around with, but those don't manage to hold the entire game on their shoulders. Pimp My Ride is a driving video game based on the TV show of the same name. It was developed by Eutechnyx and was released on November 21st, 2006 for the PlayStation 2 in North America. It has a 36 out of 100 on Metacritic. Eutechnyx was also the developer of Ride to Hell Retribution, among many other random racing games like Big Mother Truckers 2 Truck Me Harder. They would eventually go on to develop the official NASCAR games for a few years. Pimp My Ride isn't exactly a racing game though. It's more like a very light version of The Simpsons Hit and Run. Pimp My Ride was a show hosted by Exhibit that started in 2004 and aired for 6 seasons on MTV. The show centered each episode around a person who had a seriously messed up car. Exhibit would then take the person's car and personalize it, effectively pimping the car out with a new paint job, new features, new bodywork, etc. I never really liked Pimp My Ride when it was on. I always saw it when I scrolled through the channels and thought that it looked interesting, but I would tune out like 10 minutes into an episode. But the world did not feel the same because Pimp My Ride was one of MTV's most popular shows for quite a while. This is similarly what we do in the video game adaptation of Pimp My Ride. Our overall goal is to upgrade different recipients' rides. We head to the person's house where we get an absolutely cursed scene of them freaking out. We then get a tour of their busted ride while Exhibit makes fun of it. We then get to take one of our personal cars around the city and round up cash that we use to pimp that ride. We do this by playing a variety of different minigames. In one of them, we play a rhythm game while we ghost ride the whip down the street. In another one, we cruise past people and press 3 buttons in sequence. That's all of the minigames. That's it. There are some other very short ones we'll play in the next segment, but we basically do this all over the map until we get enough money to pimp the person's ride. We can also collect cash icons and various collectibles around the city. For some reason, we also get cash from crashing into other people's cars. I'm not sure why this was even a thing, and it took me forever to even realize I was supposed to do this. Once we get enough cash, we have to head back to the contestant's house where we can take their car to go pimp it. At this point, it's a race against the clock and a rival garage that's also somehow deciding to pimp their car as well. We have to run around the city taking the car to various distributors who can give us different spray paints, body styles, wheels, etc. We can also get some optional secret upgrades from Exhibit every once in a while. As long as we pimp the ride better than the rival, then we win, and the customer leaves satisfied. This takes somewhere around 20 minutes each time we do it, and pimping out rides will unlock new sets of rides to pimp. But once you've done this once, you've basically done it every single time. It's just the same loop over and over again with different contestants and different cars. There's some variety because the map changes very slightly each time, but it's not much. There's one large map and each mission will see us using different sections of it, but these overlap very early on, even into like the second mission. There just really isn't that much to this game. It was fun the first time around, but doing it 12 or however many times it takes to beat this game is just exhausting. It's also not very difficult either, because the minimum cash that you need to start pimping the ride is almost always more than enough to get the best gear at each distributor. So all you have to do is just get the basic upgrades and spend all of your money and you win. It's rarely ever actually difficult to pull this off. It's kind of a disappointment because I do really like at least the aesthetics of the bling era, and that's kind of what Pimp My Ride was all about. But this game doesn't really reflect any of that. In fact, it comes off as super dorky, watching someone ghost ride the whip down the main street and doing these lame-ass moves. It's possible that it's just dated and there really was no chance of this being a good representation of bling era aesthetics, but it at least disappointed one person, me. The game also just doesn't make sense. We crash cars to make money so that we can pimp someone's ride, but then we don't even get to customize it. The fact that this game didn't lean into customization at all is just insane to me. Of course, we can ultimately pick the car part that we want to put on the car, but why wouldn't you just pick the highest rated part every single time? It would never make sense to pick a lower rated one, lose the level, and then have to do it over again. Also, how are two garages pimping out one car at the same time? Did they clone the original car so they could both get a shot at it? Why wouldn't the person just choose to keep both cars at the end? The whole thing is so weird, the driving is terrible, it's a bad premise, no substance, no fun, it's just a lot of nothing. One of the funniest things about the original show that I only learned while researching it for this video was that most of their upgrades to the cars were fake. They would upgrade cars which sometimes took 6 to 8 months, leaving people without a car to drive for almost half a year. And then on top of that, if there were deeper issues with the car when they were doing the upgrade, like if the alternator was broken, for example, they just wouldn't fix it because it didn't matter for the show. The people on the show would then effectively have a pimped out car with a DVD player and a sound system, but it just wouldn't run. In that way, the game kind of feels accurate to that original idea. Our main goal in the game is to fund the actual show, which is why we run around grabbing cash for half of it. And the customization isn't really important. We just have to make it as expensive and highly graded as possible to impress the audience. Except that the game didn't impress the audience, because it's awful, and I wouldn't recommend it to anyone. Celebrity Deathmatch is a fighting game based on the TV show of the same name. It was developed by Big Ape Productions, and it was released on October 15th, 2003 in North America for the PlayStation 2. It has a 32 out of 100 on Metacritic. If you aren't aware, Celebrity Deathmatch was a television show that aired on MTV between the years of 1998 and 2001. It had a short revival in 2006 that only lasted for 2 seasons. The show had 2 pilots, one short that aired during MTV's cartoon Sushi in 1997, and another that aired during their halftime special in 98. After this, the show was picked up for a full series run. The show itself consisted of generally 3 fights featuring different celebrities in each episode that were popular at the time. The fighters in the show either generally had something thematically in common, like Tim Allen and Jerry Seinfeld in the first episode, or they just shared similar names, like Mariah Carey and Jim Carrey, also in the first episode. The show was full claymation, giving it a pretty distinct style for the time. It also displayed lots of shock humor and violence. Part of the show's appeal was the satire on the pop culture of the time, but also the vicious deaths that celebrities would face at the hands of another. I remember the show itself being pretty funny when I watched it as a kid. It wasn't something that I returned to constantly, but it felt like it was one of those shows that was always on, and I was never mad that I got to watch a full episode of it. It's obviously incredibly dated now because all of its references were to things that were popular at the time. It's a similar story with the game. The Celebrity Deathmatch adaptation was developed by Big Ape Productions, who also developed Simpsons Wrestling and the Phantom Menace PS1 game, interestingly enough. The game itself doesn't really have a story mode, but rather an episode mode. Here we can play through 6 episodes of the show, each with 3 matches to tackle. My first complaint comes with the fact that there's not really enough character to necessitate this many episodes. There's 27 characters total, only 20 of which are unlocked at the start of the game. But 3 fights each episode, with 6 episodes total, means 18 episodes, and 2 fighters in each fight means 36 total fighters. We're 9 short there. So that means there are a lot of overlaps in the episodes where we're just playing as people we've already played as, or at least fighting people that we already have. The celebrity characters range from Jerry Springer to Marilyn Manson to Busta Rhymes to Carrot Top. There's a few people in this list that would be slightly somewhat relevant today, but most of these people like Miss Cleo or Tommy Lee just leave the game feeling terribly dated, much like the show itself. In some ways, it does exist as a weird time capsule for the late 90s / early 2000s pop culture scene. You can also unlock some original or fun characters like Alien or Mummy. Unlocking further episodes of the game requires that you get a perfect rating on the episodes before it. This just means winning every match in the episode in one go, which is very simple. If you manage to get perfect on all episodes, you can unlock the 2 commentators to play as fighters, and they're actually some of the worst characters in the game. The game itself is sort of a fighting game, but its systems are incredibly weak. The way that the game is framed in this large ring almost leaves you expecting a wrestling game, but that's not what it is at all. You basically have 4 moves, each mapped to one of the face buttons: X, square, circle, and triangle. They're mostly different for every character and generally themed around that character. Ron Jeremy has a bunch of moves that reference his package, let's call it, seeing him riding a banana to attack his target. Marilyn Manson has gory moves that all reference the fact that he's like a freak, I guess, but he's basically Voldo from Soul Calibur. Dennis Rodman dribbles a ball around the ring. Tommy Lee uses a guitar. You get the point. Each character also has a grab move that will see them going into a fixed animation, generally accompanied by a camera change. Each character also has a super move that they can use once their MTV bar gets full. That's another weird thing about this game, that the MTV logo is so prominently featured. I remembered when the channel was a cultural touchstone, but at this point, it's just another thing that really dates the game. The biggest problem with the actual gameplay is just that it's way too easy. This is partly because the AI is terrible, rarely ever blocking, and if it does, you can often get through it with one of the grab moves. You can also stomp and kick your opponent when they're on the ground, and a lot of the time, the person on the ground can't really do anything unless they roll out before you attack. There's also just so many overpowered moves that you can spam to victory. I think I only lost one single match when I was playing through all of the episodes, and that was just because it was the very first match that I ever played, so I had no idea what I was doing. As soon as I got a grip on the gameplay, I cruised through this whole thing. The only praise that I can even really give this game are the finishing moves. To win a match, you have to get your opponent's health low enough to get a kill logo to pop up. Once this happens, you can press circle to do a finishing move and win the match. Each character has their own themed finishing move, and it feels very reminiscent of the actual show. These pretty funny, gory finish moves make the game actually feel unique, like it stands out, and presents the comedy that the game is trying to get across. A lot of the rest of the game is taken up by the commentary sections that the announcers host before and after every match. These were a big part of the original show, so it makes sense that they're put into focus here. The whole game is just kind of bland, though, even though it has this distinct style, and it does quite pull off the fact that it feels like the property that it's based on. There just really isn't a lot to do. The fighting system is skin deep, so when you manage to beat the episode mode in about an hour or so, you aren't going to have much left to do because it's not like you're going to get much better at the game. Celebrity Deathmatch also doesn't really look that much like the show it's based on. I mean, of course, it technically kind of looks like it, but pulling out that claymation movement and texture just leaves the game feeling cheap and separate. At the end of the day, it's clear that this game was just a quick cash grab. It was just meant to turn a profit from the very limited popularity of Celebrity Deathmatch, and I'm not sure it managed to do even that. Fugitive Hunter War on Terror is a first-person shooter developed by Black Ops Entertainment. It was released on November 18th, 2003 for the PlayStation 2 in North America. It was also released in August of 2004 in Europe as America's 10 Most Wanted. It has a 35 out of 100 on Metacritic. Fugitive Hunter War on Terror is another very dated, very strange game, but not because it's based on a dated property like some other games on this list. It's dated because it could have only been made in a brief window during the early 2000s. The game sees us playing a US agent tasked with taking down every criminal on the country's most wanted list. Interestingly enough, Black Ops Entertainment also developed some 007 games and the X-Files game, Resist and Serve, which I'll talk about that series at length in a different video. This was one of Black Ops' final games as a studio before being shut down. The game was in pre-production throughout the late 90s and originally had a level set in New York with the World Trade Center in the background, but when the 9/11 terrorist attacks happened, they decided to remove the level. They almost considered canceling the game as well, but the game's director and head of the studio, John Boddy, took George W. Bush's words to heart and decided to press on.
What we wound up doing is really what President Bush said, is just carry on with your lives. Continue. Do not let these people interfere with our liberty.
Fugitive Hunter itself is a pretty simple FPS. In each level, we have multiple objectives to complete. Find evidence to prosecute criminals, destroy weapon caches, rescue hostages, and finally, capture the fugitive. Moving through the levels, we fight off tons of enemies, pick up new weapons, standard FPS stuff. We can shoot with the R1 button, which is kind of odd to get used to, and shoot a secondary weapon with the R2 button. Jump is mapped to the L1 button, and that's kind of it. It's a very simple game, and that's part of what holds it back so much. The aiming is absolutely terrible, and there's only a few guns in the game that are even reliable to use. The other ones are incredibly difficult to use, hard to control, and you mostly just end up spraying and praying throughout the entire game. We can of course gain health pickups and get a shield to protect us from taking damage, and there's a ton of first aid packs in this game. Sometimes they're literally making a trail throughout the level to show you where to go. Obviously, developers will often use floating items as a way to lightly guide players throughout the level, but making a straight up linear trail is just insane and really looks bad for the level. It's a design mechanic that seems like it works better for platformers rather than a supposedly realistic first-person shooter. By far the worst part about the game, though, is the level design. And by that, I mean that there basically is no level design. In my opinion, designing levels is one of the most in-depth parts of game development. There's so much nuance to making a good level, naturally guiding the player through the game, and also hiding secrets that can be found but aren't too obvious. Fugitive Hunter basically just creates levels and objectives with no sense of cohesion, no purpose behind where objectives are, where lanes in the level are, or why certain rooms are accessible. It's just plain confusing to wander through this game. Half of the objectives blend into the background of the environment and you have no idea that they're supposed to be interacted with. So you find yourself killing all of the enemies and then wandering around the level trying to figure out where the key or weapon cache is. The game often spawns enemies sporadically in a level too. Sometimes you'll be fighting enemies, heading towards the natural conclusion of the level, heading up to the second story of a building, but then you can't go through the next door, so you need to go back down and kill more enemies that were spawned downstairs. But wait, the game just spawned more enemies upstairs, and back and forth and back and forth. This is the quintessential example of padding out game length to make sure that players get the most time out of 6 missions in a game. Because if these short levels played out like a regular game, Fugitive Hunter's runtime would be around an hour or so. You get an extra hour of game by forcing the player to wander around nonsensically. By far the weirdest mechanic in the game is the actual capture of the fugitives that we're chasing. Once we reach the criminal that we need to bring in, we have to get into a hand-to-hand fist fight with them to actually take them in. This results in a very poorly made one-round fighting game. The enemy character basically just spam attacks us, and hopefully we eventually get an opening to get some offense in as well. Our basic attacks like punches and kicks don't do much damage though. The main way to do damage to our enemy is to pull off super combos. These can only be used when the enemy's health bar is flashing. We get the enemy's health bar to flash by doing damage, so we essentially have to do some damage, then pull off a super combo. We can do this basically twice and take the enemy down. It's very hard to get a rhythm down in the beginning because the system feels so erratic and broken, but once you do get it down, it's very simple. It's also just sort of a goofy minigame in general that feels so tonally separate from the rest of the game. The fact that we have a hand-to-hand fighting boss battle at the end of each level where we're rushing through levels and brutally dispensing with thugs is insane. Fugitive Hunter War on Terror has such a general weird tonal problem too. The original TV ads for this game actually had filmed sequences of a fugitive hunter heading out to attack terrorists, and this is accompanied by a really weird hip-hop verse in the background. Where's Abdullah? He's been hiding? Holy shit. I also haven't mentioned it yet, but the game actually literally features Osama bin Laden as the final boss. The European version of the game also featured Saddam Hussein. This is why I say that this game could have only been made and released very recently post 9/11. In that same interview with John Body that I talked about before, he said that the game wasn't meant to be a game about taking out terrorists, citing the fact that there were many other criminals in the game like gangsters and militia members. But then he ends this interview by telling people to play the game if they want to gun down terrorists and take their anger out.
So if you want to go and kick the crap out of the Al-Qaeda guys, if you want to burn them, if you want to blow them up, if you want to smoke them out of their holes and caves in Afghanistan, then go ahead and play Fugitive Hunter.
It's very clear this game was sort of trying to use the outrage of the early 2000s and find a way to make some money off of it. That might not have been the original premise when the development started, but it certainly became a part of the game along the way. It doesn't help that the rest of the game was incredibly poorly made, just a terrible FPS all around. The game actually kind of gave me a headache to play. I definitely wouldn't recommend Fugitive Hunter under any circumstances. I don't really think there's anything redeeming about this game at all. Godai Elemental Force is a beat-em-up action game developed by 3DO Games. It was released on January 21st, 2002 in North America for the PlayStation 2. It has a 27 out of 100 on Metacritic. Godai Elemental Force is one of the most boring and frustrating games that I've ever played. I've played games that crash and just don't work. I've played shovelware. I've played terribly buggy games. Godai's problem isn't that it doesn't work, it's the way that it was designed, which is flawed from the start. The actual combat systems at play here can barely be used to full effect. Fighting through a group of enemies is a challenging affair, not because of difficulty, but because the game is forcing you to interact with its asinine systems that don't lend themselves to fun or flowing gameplay. The introduction briefly tells us about the vague concepts of the world that I would hesitate to call story. There's a king. There's 4 elements. The king protects them, and some bad guys want to get them. We then see some warriors, specifically a samurai invading a castle to seemingly take a child that has inherited these elements. This child is saved before he can get to it though, stolen away in the night by a dexterous hero. The actual game starts 20 years later, after darkness has taken over the land. We see our main character, named Hero, training. Quite on the nose if you ask me. And then the game just kind of starts. It's implied that our goal is to collect these 4 elements across the lands, and each area is themed after one of these elements, one for wind, fire, earth, and water. But that's kind of all the story that we're going to get here. The actual game itself plays much like a standard 3D beat-em-up in the most basic of ways. We can attack enemies, and hitting the attack button multiple times will pull off a short combo. We can also dash towards the enemy with the circle button, causing Hero to attack upon reaching the enemy. There's a weird slow-mo system that we can use, but I have literally no idea what this is for. I think maybe it was for dodging projectiles, but if you have the time to see a projectile incoming and can react by using slow-mo, then you definitely have enough time to just walk out of the way. You can't really attack while you're using it, so it isn't meant to be a slow-mo shoot sort of mechanic. It's very strange, and I just never really found a good use for it. Pressing the L1 button will allow us to throw projectiles at enemies, which can be picked up around the world, dropped by enemies, or found in smashed boxes. We can also find weapons in the same way. Weapons are basically the main system that this game implements. Each weapon that we pick up has a certain amount of durability. Once this runs out, our weapon breaks and we have to use a different one. We can repair durability on any weapon by finding an anvil around the level, or we can just pick up another weapon to recharge the durability of the same one. These weapons are okay, but they're essentially all the same. I'm sure that some of them do more damage, but if they do, it seems very slight. This is essentially the whole battle system. There are other things like elemental magics that we get after beating certain levels and choosing weapons in between levels, but this is kind of the gist of the system. The problem with the game in general is just that it's so damn uncomfortable to play. Half the time we're just mashing buttons and trying to do damage to enemies, getting through their guard. We don't have a lot of options outside of our main combo though. The dash button just sometimes doesn't work like you want it to, leaving you ripped completely out of the flow of combat. Sometimes you can do neat little things like stun enemies with projectile smokes and then get a good combo off on them, but these little mechanics are very few and far between. This often leaves you just mashing the attack button in combat, trading blows with enemies over and over again. There's also some light platforming mechanics in the game, because we start the game with what is basically the ability of flight. We can jump straight up in the air and hover for a second before slowly gliding downwards. Not only is this incredibly difficult to make precision jumps with, but it is kind of overpowered when it comes to distance. You can often just skip entire rooms with this and run away from enemies entirely. It wouldn't be so bad if the verticality of the jump was limited, or if the levels in the game were designed around having such a high jump. While researching the game, I found a comment on a video by Rooker Vision Gaming Videos, "Is Godai Elemental Force a terrible game?" The comment was left by Phil Burrows. I would take this with a grain of salt because, of course, anyone can say anything on the internet, but Phil Burrows was credited as one of the artists on the game. In this comment, Phil Burrows said, "I worked on that damn game. I could tell you I wanted to jump from the 3DO window, and half the art department would have followed. I knew it was doomed when I turned in several pages of research on feudal Japan and graphics concepts, only to have it ignored and the CEO decide he wanted our Japanese hero, named Hero of course, to look like a Frenchman with an exposed midriff. And yes, he loved Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, so the flying stuck. Graphics allowance was ridiculously small, hence the stretched ground graphics. But I want you to know, most of us look back on it as fondly as a 6-month-long root canal." It's clear that the entire team weren't on the same page, and I can't imagine what it's like working so hard on something and pouring yourself into it, only for someone else to come in without a word and stomp all over that. Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon was released 2 years before this game, so I'd imagine that someone in the studio was trying to profit off of the wire-flying martial arts style that was popular at the time. I can't say that I would recommend this game. I didn't even finish it, to be honest. I got to the first boss and just had to give up because I wasn't even having fun. I do love bad video games, but not this one. Gravity Games' Bike, Street Vert Dirt is a BMX video game developed by Midway Games San Diego. It was released on June 27, 2002 in North America for the PlayStation 2. It has a 24 out of 100 on Metacritic, the lowest rating a PS2 game has on the entire site. Before we start talking about the game, I just have to say that Gravity Games' Bike, Street Vert Dirt is the worst video game title that I've ever seen, hands down. It does the opposite of roll off the tongue. It slowly skids down the tongue, getting caught on every taste bud along the way. For this reason, I'm just going to refer to this game as Bike from here on out. Bike is a terrible game, honestly one of the worst that I've ever played. Discounting random Steam games, only talking about actually published titles released by big publishers, this game is fucking awful. I originally wanted to compare Bike to another BMX game released around the same time, Dave Mirra's Freestyle BMX 2, released on the PlayStation 2 just a year earlier. But honestly, playing both of these games back to back, Bike is more similar to the Tony Hawk games than anything else. And that's honestly a bad thing. This is because the Tony Hawk games have a very specific level design in mind, one that's meant for, comboing grinds together and manualing and reverting, etc. Getting precision movements on a bike in a larger map to do things like hit barrels for an objective is frankly just more cumbersome than it would be on a skateboard. But the game's structure is very similar to the Tony Hawk's Pro Skater series. Each level takes place in a run that lasts a few minutes. We have this limited time to complete various goals throughout the stage. Some of these require us to get a high score. Others require us to interact with the environment, drain the pool, knock over acid barrels, trap people in dumpsters, etc. When I started the game, I could not figure out how it worked in the slightest. Some of this was because the game doesn't really tell you anything, and other parts of it were because the game is just like that, basically unfinished. For a while, I was trying to do flip tricks by combining directional inputs with the square button. This worked, but for only a few of the directional buttons, and the rest were just nothing. Or sometimes they would work, and sometimes they wouldn't. It was the same story for the grab tricks, combining directional inputs with the circle button while in the air. Eventually, I was forced to find the manual online, where I found a list of some of the tricks that you can do in the game, and it is the most nonsensical shit I've ever seen. There are 2 tricks mapped to the basic inputs for tricks. Press down and square and you'll do a backflip. Press up and square and you'll do a Superman. Everything else requires at least 2 directional inputs to pull off, meaning any other trick in the game requires some combo of 2 directional inputs to even use. A look down is left down square. A tail whip is up down square. If you're familiar with Pro Skater, there's a simple trick mapped to every combination of a directional button and a trick button, grab button, or grind button. You can press that face button twice to get a different trick though. It's a pretty damn simple system to understand. If you want to do special tricks in the game, then those usually require some extra button inputs, but that makes sense because, well, those are special tricks. This is just the least accessible system ever on its face. But there's something even more nefarious underneath. The fact that this whole system just doesn't even work half the time. It's like a coin flip whether you're going to be able to pull off the trick that you're trying to. Sometimes you might get something else. Sometimes you might get nothing at all. The game is so damn unresponsive, it's frustrating. The system just isn't there at all. In Pro Skater, it's pretty easy to grind, jump from the rail, do a flip trick, land on another rail, and grind again. In Bike, it's damn near impossible. It's difficult to even get the game to let you jump from one rail to another and keep the grind going, let alone doing a trick in between. This is partially because the game is so unresponsive, and partly because you have to do extra inputs in between the very small jump. It's also just so hard to control this bike and make precise movements, so trying to pick up letters throughout the level or complete environmental objectives is much more difficult and way less fun than it is in other games like this. The only way that I could even get a good score on a level was just to stick to the vert ramp and run back and forth, trying to pull off clean tricks again and again. The game also just lacks so many features that other games of this same time period had. We don't get extra score for doing spins. We can't even land backwards, which is something that Dave Mira's Freestyle BMX had already done at this point. Hell, this game was a year removed from Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 3, one of the best games in this style ever made. There really is no excuse for this game to be as bad as it is. Gravity Games' Bike, Street Vert Dirt has awful mechanics that don't mesh well together. The game actually feels like a prototype. If it was a prototype, it would be fine, but this was a full game that was released to the public and sold for money. Everything about it is bad. The levels are poorly designed. The objectives, while difficult to pull off with the janky systems the game has, are simple and unfun. The game's trick system is so poorly implemented that it feels like playing a complicated fighting game just to do a simple can-can. Even the damn title is bad, which is so disappointing, because when I booted the game up, I was actually excited. The intro is just sick BMX footage with Disturbed's Down with the Sickness blasting in the background. Classic early 2000s font and editing choices. I was ready for a great experience, and Bike did not deliver. This is literally one of the worst games that I've ever played, and that's saying something. 25 to Life is a third-person action game developed by Avalanche Software with assistance from Ritual Entertainment. It was released on January 18, 2006 in North America for the PlayStation 2. It has a 39 out of 100 on Metacritic. 25 to Life is like Max Payne if it was about gangsters and police officers, and if it was way more janky. Now, I actually think this is the only game on the list that I had a decent time with. The controls aren't the greatest, and the enemy AI has some issues, but overall, it's just a decent generic shooter from the time. On the other side of that coin, though, this game did come out in 2006, and Gears of War came out in 2006, so it was a bit late to have just a really janky shooter coming out, especially near the release of next-generation consoles. The game itself sees us playing multiple different characters on both sides of the law, going to war in the streets of the city. The game has a pretty simple control scheme. We shoot with R1 and zoom in with L3. We can carry 2 ranged weapons at once and 1 melee weapon. We pick up health items and ammo from enemies that we kill along the way. We can lean from behind cover, though we can't actually take cover, meaning that our character doesn't actually lock and magnetize to the item that we're taking cover behind. We can just sort of crouch or stand there and hope that the bullets flying don't hit us. That's one of the problems with the game, though, is that bullets do often just straight up hit us. Often cover just doesn't work, and we really can't lean far enough out to shoot enemies very often. We're generally always in danger of being hit by enemies, so that would naturally make you think you might need to use a more aggressive strategy. This would be absolutely stupid to think, though, because if we happen to be out of cover in front of even more than one enemy, we get obliterated by those enemies and taken out right away. The enemies also move very erratically, constantly pivoting back and forth, rarely ever stopping to take cover, which makes them harder to hit than if they actually did sit behind a crate or something. They also just love to bum rush our character, giving us absolutely no room to aim or maneuver around an area. Especially in the second half of the game, we often just have nowhere to move and get very quickly overwhelmed. Some of the bosses or stronger enemies in the game are simply overpowered as well. They will literally just drain our health in 2 or 3 shots, giving us barely any time to react to their presence. This is probably the biggest issue with the game in general. We just don't really have a good way to go about combat consistently. Cover doesn't work very well, and often when we do take cover, it's behind something that can explode like a vehicle. But also, moving and shooting is unreliable as well, and getting hit too much will absolutely decimate us anyways. The solution to this is doing both of these anyways and just sort of ramming your head against the wall until it works. When it does work and we can actually find a solution to a combat encounter, the game is actually kind of fun. It's just a generic shooter, but it has the capacity to be a pretty good time. It's odd because the game would work so much better if you could actually pick up healing items and use them in combat, instead of only healing from pickups on the ground. Just an idea, but maybe you could pick up something like painkillers and then you could use them to heal, and there could even be a little HUD icon showing you how many you have left. Yeah, I don't know, it's just a thought. The story of the game centers around 3 characters: Freeze, Sean, and Lester. Freeze is the first character that we're introduced to in Chapter 1. He gets home to his family where he tells his wife to basically shut the fuck up and
so get off his case. Only God could judge him.
Freeze realizes that the life of crime that he has led is starting to run out, and that he needs to find an exit route from the criminal organization that he's been involved with. Freeze tells his friend Sean that he wants out, but obviously Sean doesn't want him to get out of the game, so he tells Freeze he has one last job to do. When Freeze arrives at the job, he sees the Colombians that he was supposed to give the drugs to already dead, and a Fed named Mendoza there to kill him. We then have to escape the city, taking down the police that are chasing us. Freeze returns to his apartment complex to find Sean, but he finds it already overrun by police, and his former gang members are attacking him. There's a pretty awkward sort of pseudo-stealth section here, where the game tells us not to alert the police because they will call for backup. We can use a melee weapon to jankily take them out, but even if we use a gun, they definitely do not call for backup at all. One of my favorite trends in bad games is when the game just straight up claims to have mechanics that it doesn't, which is really funny. Once Freeze gets back to his apartment, he finds out that his family has been kidnapped, and if he wants his family back, and out of this life of crime, he'll have to get the kidnappers some money. So of course, we have to rob a bank. We get away with the loot and are chased by SWAT teams, but eventually Freeze gets apprehended by the police anyways. We then switch over to playing Lester Williams for the next chapter, a police officer. Lester has found some missing cocaine from the evidence locker, and Mendoza theorizes that it could be Sean, Freeze's friend, or at least that he could have some sort of connection to the thievery. We have to raid Sean's house and find some evidence inside, but the man himself is already gone. We chase Sean through a nightclub, taking care of the D-Boys gang members in our way. We eventually chase him through a subway and finally apprehend him. As we're taking him in, though, he reveals that Mendoza was involved in the operation from the start. This forces Mendoza to kill Lester, and she frames Sean for the murder, letting him run away to Mexico. We then switch over to playing Sean, as he's fled the country to find some work in Tijuana. Sean is trying to take over the local cartel turf here, and has found a feud with a man named Riggs, who runs the area. We litter the streets with dead cartel members before Sean decides to target the casino and hit the thugs where it hurts, their money. He steals all the cash in their vault, and this draws out the leader of the cartel, who Sean, of course, tracks down and kills. This leaves Sean somehow able to take over the cartel operations and become a drug kingpin. The final chapter of the game sees us playing as Freeze again, as he's now been put in prison. He laments the fact that his best friend kidnapped his family and is now a rich criminal, while he sits in prison. Of course, Freeze is able to break out during a riot, and he then tracks down Mendoza and kills her for being involved in the operation, or something. We then have a final battle against Sean as Freeze tracks him down to try and locate his family. This final level is one of the most annoying, as we play Freeze with an LMG against an army of Sean's goons. There are just so many people shooting at us at once. We die constantly because it's almost impossible to stand up to their firepower, and there are so many areas with little to no cover for us to take. Freeze eventually kills Sean after he tells him that he was raising his kid to be just like him. This whole game started because Monica wanted Freeze to get out of crime because she didn't want him being a bad influence on their son. In the final scene, Freeze finds his son once again and tells him that you don't need to use guns to get things in this world. Then the cops show up and Freeze tells his son that it's them against the world, and Freeze goes to kill more cops. The story for this game is really fucking weird. Some of it is laughably bad, though I wasn't really looking for a cinematic masterpiece from this game. There are some absolutely insane one-liners.
Hey, amigo, what's happening? What's going on?
Who the fuck are you?
I'm your friend, senor.
I don't have any friends. Let's go, you and me, motherfucker.
We have come to the end of the road, amigo.
Smile, motherfucker. Deuce, deuce in your face.
25 to Life is certainly an odd game. It has a bunch of issues and definitely isn't perfect, but it was a fun little action title that I mostly enjoyed. There were some frustrating moments, but I definitely wouldn't say that it's one of the worst games on the PS2. As we've already seen, there are games far more deserving of those titles. The game also just has a fantastic hip-hop soundtrack. Tupac, KRS-One, Ghetto Boys, DMX, and Public Enemy are just a few of the absolute hitters that appear in this game. There's a lot to not like about this game, but there's also a lot of style too. Thanks again for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, be sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel, as it really helps me out. I was really excited to do this video because I wanted to take the format from the worst reviewed Steam games videos and apply it to other systems. Playing the worst games on the PS2 is a whole different ball game to trolling the depths of Steam. A lot of the time I get games on the Steam charts that barely function or can't even run, so getting to play a handful of games that are actually playable was a pretty good time. I hope to do more of these in the future because there's a lot more bad PS2 games that I'd like to check out, possibly even PS3 or PS1 games as well. If you have any poorly reviewed PS2 games you want me to check out, be sure to leave them in the comments below. I also want to shout out all the amazing people that support me over on Patreon. If you want to join this list of fantastic people right here and get access to exclusive content only posted on Patreon, then go subscribe through the link in the description. Thanks again for watching. Bye, Dad.